Okay, so let's continue with the corporation tier list. It's time to do colonies. Now, at some point I wanted to wait until it was released on Steam, but that might not be for years, so I'll just probably finish the corporation tier list for a few, within a few months. And this will be all of my next tier list videos, so well, I hope you enjoy it, and let's begin. So, Colonies corporations are, I think, one of the most balanced groups in the game. And yeah, we start with one of the strongest ones, Aridor. Now, I want to put Aridor right at the top of Always Solid. Okay, so let's look at Aridor's ability, which is the main reason why it's so strong. Aridor gains 1 money production every time you play a new tag, or tag you haven't played before. Now, to clarify, tags on event cards do not count, which means the event tag never counts, and the wild tag doesn't count as a different tag, it just doesn't count at all, which means there are 11 tags available to raise your money production. So it's capped at 11, but it's because, if you think of Tarsis, or even Lakefront, which we will do later, or Poseidon, which is in this one, those aren't capped like Aridor, so they can get to higher than 11, even though most of them would be rare, but none of them can race as fast as Aridor. With Aridor, it's not rare to get 4 tags, especially with preludes. 4 or 5 tags in the first generation, it's not hard, especially if you plan for it. 6, 7 tags by the second one, not weird. And then, if you think about it, the diversifier milestone, I see that one claimed fairly fast, like third or fourth generation, and that's 8 tags. So to get 8 production passively, that's without even trying, for the most part. In the first 3 generation, that's insane. That's one of the best economies in the game. You can compare it to Terractor. Yeah, Terractor has 20 more cash, but Terractor's ability is not gonna be as fast as Poseidon in producing. If you play 3 tags in the first generation, Terractor has to play an Earth tag every generation to catch up to you, right? And the more tags you play, the more impossible it becomes for Terractor. So I think Aridor is one of the best economies in the game. This is one of the best abilities in the game. And the other thing that's kind of underrated, and that's my son agreeing with me, is that I don't love it, but it's not most people even ignore it. But bringing the colony tile, now it can be useless. It might be the case that the colonies you want are in, and this is useless, and you might actually be forced to bring something for a player you don't want to bring, especially if you're playing with a lot of players and all of the remaining colonies mean something to each one of them. If you're playing with 2 players, it's rare. But if you don't, the main colony you want to bring in is Pluto, right? Because you're gonna have a lot of cash, and the thing that goes best with a lot of cash is a lot of cards. So basically, you can guarantee a way to draw cards with Aridor, because you can always make sure Pluto is in the game, and you'll always have a great economy. That's why I put it in Always Solid. I don't think it makes the jump. Maybe I need to play it a little more, but I don't think it makes the jump into that best tier. I think most of these economic bonuses are better for the most part. And Minor Tech even can produce points with plants at the end, so... But yeah, I do put it at the top of Always Solid. Now, Arklight. Arklight is one of my favorite corporations, probably a second one after Viron. But it's not that good. I'm gonna throw it here in playable. Let's discuss what it does. So, it's basically, it has the ability of Ecological Zone. Whenever you play a plant or animal tag, you get an animal. 1 VP per 2 animals, and it also gives you 1 animal tag. It's kind of regrettable that it doesn't give you a plant tag. I feel that could have totally been included. And it's the only animal corp, which is really nice. Of course, it comes with Colonies, which has a way to throw animals from the colonies, but you probably want to do that on a 1-point animal, not on Arklight anyway. But it does activate it from the start. So that's another nice thing about Arklight. That you can trade for animals very early. Now, I've seen this ability produce about 6 points at most, maybe 7 sometimes. And it does have a decent economy. Like 45 is slightly above average, and the 2 money production makes it a bit flexible. So you can totally be flexible with Arklight. You don't have to go for plants and animals right away or terraforming. You focus on economy, hit your colonies, whatever you want, and then but by the end of the game you do want to play a bunch of plantings basically. So I often just accumulate cards that give me 2 or more plant production and pretty much any animal card in the game, and then play a bunch of those at the last generations. But the beginning of the game is mostly economic for me with Arklight. Now I don't think it's super strong, and I wouldn't even put it in high combo potential because I don't think it's a combo corporation. Like a lot of people think of Arklight with Ecological Sun as a combo. I don't see it as a combo. I see it as like they both have the same ability, but they're not really comboing, you know? Like the total is equal to the sum of the parts, therefore it's not a combo for me, right? Like it's like if you play birds and fish and tap them both, that's not a combo really. You're just getting the same ability from both. Like what I would call a combo, and let's just use the best combo in the game in my opinion for that example, is Byron with AI Central. Byron by itself is really random what it does, and AI Central by itself draws 2 cards, but together they draw 4. And they do so very cheaply because AI Central has all the cost on the paying for the card and not on the drawing of the cards. So that's like there the the sum is better. The total is better than the sum of the parts. With Byron and AI Central. With Arklight and Ecological Zone, it's really just two things doing the same thing in parallel, right? But it's not a combo. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I would put it here at the bottom of playable. Of course, I'm assuming we're talking about Colonies, and that's why it's below Thorgate. Otherwise, I'd probably move it higher. And Turmoil, it does get an advantage in Turmoil from playing greens, but the way I play it, the way I think you should play it, it really doesn't, because like I said, you don't have to play the green text too early. You do like the green party probably, and if you have a very green hand, you can lean into that, but you can play a different type of game with Arklight and then just play the tax later in the game. So I don't think it's very much affected by Turmoil. Let's move on to Polyphemos, and I do not like Polyphemos. I do think it needs the hand. And so part of that hand could be Pluto, but let's see what it does first. So Polyphemos, you know, you just look at the left side of this corporation and it looks like amazing, like holy shit. 50 cash, which is very high, 5 production, which is insanely high, and then 5 titanium just to top it off. But then you look at the ability and realize that it's, you know, it's not that it sucks, it's that it's like a negative ability. You have to pay 5 when buying for cards. And you could say, I've seen the argument made that, okay, so you have 5 production. If you buy 2 extra cards each turn, you're paying 4 extra. So not 2 extra cards, 2 cards from the draft each turn. You're paying 4 extra, so that leaves you with still like 1 production, and it negates your negative ability. And sure, that's true, but then you're just playing a very shitty corporation with no ability. Like all you've done is make it have no ability and have 1 production. So, and 1 production is pretty mediocre, right? So like if you negate those 2 things, like your corporation ability is supposed to be one of the strongest thing you have in the game. Right, like that's why Aridor is up here. If you look at the top cards, it's all like just the best abilities. And okay, you would have a corporation that starts rich and has 1 production and no abilities. If you buy 2 cards, if you need to buy more, then it's a negative. So, no, I think it sucks. I think it's nearly impossible to play this without consistent card draw, and I think you probably need 2 ways to draw cards. So I mean, there's Pluto, because this comes with Colonies. I think it's intended to be played with Pluto. But if Pluto is not in the game, I would not play this unless I see 2 persistent card draws in my hand. And on top of that, the persistent card draw cannot be the ones that make you pay for the card, like Inventors Guild or Business Empire, because those are just as bad as your draft. So you're talking about Development Center, Restricted Area, AI Central, Of course, if you have a Central, that's good enough by itself. And then Mars University and Olympus Conference. And Olympus Conference really is not that fast. Like, that one would need a lot of help. And then in the expansions, you have, I think, Aerial Mappers and Red Spore Observatory, which, again, they draw every other turn, so they're, you can barely count those as helping Polyphemos. So yeah, I think they need the hand. It's just very specific. It's either Pluto or those cards in your starting hand, or I wouldn't play this. So yeah, I think it's really weak. I think it's weaker than Phobos in that regard. However, Turmoil came along, and Turmoil delivered the Scientists. And the Scientists, like Polyphemos economy, lets you take advantage of the Senate or Parliament, sorry. So you can probably put the Scientists there often, maybe every other turn. If you play your cards right, and with 10 for 3 cards, that's great. You're paying one more than you would, and it's random. But yeah, I think with Turmoil, I would move it up to needs a hand, because you have Pluto, you have the Scientists, you have sufficient ways to draw cards. So yeah, I think Polyphemos it moves up a little. I would still leave it at the bottom here. Because you still need to, it's really, I think it's high difficulty to play, because you need to get used to relying on random draws, and not the cards that you see, which is what we're used to, right? Like the random draws are often just a bonus, but we usually base our strategy on what we see on the draft. And with Polyphemos, you're gonna have to keep the very best in the draft, and then just rely on the random draws for like the meat of what you're gonna play, right? You wouldn't buy Acquired Company with Polyphemos, in my opinion, or like that, like mine, but because that might be your second or third card in the draft. Like you see maybe one of the bombs in the game. Again, my son agrees. You see one of the biggest bombs in the game, you're gonna take that first. You might have to, but that's what you have to aim for, one card, so that you can really exploit your production. And the other thing is that you want to play usually big cards, and cards like Acquired Company and mine are small cards, so you're really, the extra 2 is really inflating the price, right? So yeah, I think it's bad. I think Turmoil kind of saves it and makes it almost playable, but yeah, I'm gonna keep it down here. Okay, now let's talk about Poseidon. And this is another corp that has an ability that gives you 1 production, and I think, okay, I'm gonna put it here, but I have to, okay, remember, most of my ratings are for 2 and 3 player games. It's most of what I play. I really have not that much experience playing 4 and 5 player, and that's important with Poseidon, because Poseidon gets like better in a linear way with more players. So that's because the number of colonies, well, let's read the ability. Okay, so Poseidon gives you 1 money production every time a colony is placed, and it gives you a colony and 45. So that left side is really good. Like 1 colony to start with plus 45 is really good. The right side, on a 5-player game where most players are gonna like be placing colonies early, you're gonna get like 4 production, 5 production maybe passively. But in a 2-3 player game, it's not that much, and you might not see people place their second and third colonies. If they place a third one, I think 2 or 3 colonies is usually the average I see players play, and that second and third one might not come until right before mid game probably. So yeah, I mean, unless they get a chip card with it, right? But yeah, then it becomes kind of an underwhelming ability, because it only gives you 4 or 5 production throughout the game. If you compare that to Tharsis is gonna get more usually because of the space cities, mostly in the expansions. Aridor gets 4 or 5 in the first generation, and then you can look into other things like Lakefront, which we'll talk about. Lakefront is guaranteed to get 9. So yeah, it's kind of this ability is kind of underwhelming, but this is still really strong, right? So I still put it in the playable tier, and it's really flexible. Like, there's a colony for everything, so you can gear your strategy towards anything, and you'll have this passive economic bonus that's gonna help you with everything. So Poseidon kind of like it's one of the most flexible corps. Like you don't know what they're gonna do. I prefer engine games because I can if you go for 4 colonies in a long game, that's probably better. Although rare. Now the other thing that I will notice that Poseidon doesn't really deter other people from playing colonies, which I take as a negative because, like, if you think of Saturn systems completely deters people from playing Jovians, like almost entirely. Unless they have like a bunch of multipliers to start with, but then they look at Saturn and they go, right? Tharsis really deters people from playing cities early. If you play a lot of cities early, that's probably very good for Tharsis. And Lakefront, which we haven't discussed, but it does deter people from playing oceans early. But because the colonies are so essential to be placed as soon as possible, the other things can be deferred and the Jovian attacks even ignored. But the colonies in Poseidon, everyone wants to place one first or second generation. Usually, I mean, no one tracing the first one. Maybe Poseidon would, but in the Manutech with the energy prelude, which is insane. Another reason why Manutech is broken. But by a second generation, most people are placing the colony and then trading. Poseidon does nothing to deter them, and that's why I really put it one lower than Saturn system, despite this free colony being so strong. But okay, let's get to the last one. Speaking of Jovian tags, let's talk about this piece of work. I hate this corporation, and I might be being, but it might not be this week. Like if you look at it, it has a decent amount of turn cash. Everything here in the lower tiers is usually lower at cash. Well, Aphrodite is only one, but I'm not gonna rage for Aphrodite again. But I hate it because it's a Jovian tag and a floater. Those things weren't related at all before Colonies, but in Colonies they're like almost hand in hand. But then heat. So you get to place a floater anywhere, and floaters in Stormcraft you can spend for 2 heat. Which is so weak. It's the weakest way to spend a floater in the whole game. You might as well not even put it there. And so if you compare it with Celestic, like it's pretty similar. Celestic has the same ability. Now it has a better point ratio because it's 1/3. Stormcraft is 1/4. Of course, that's a terraforming rating, which also gives you income. So it's a equal value. That's a wash. And then Stormcraft has 6 more cash, but Celestic draws 2 floater cards, which is so important. It's the only reason Celestic is playable. Stormcraft doesn't. And listen, maybe that's because it would give you 2 Jovian tags, and they might have considered it too strong. But then don't make why heat? It's just so weak. The heat is so weak, and so you can only play this if you have a really good floater card. So, I mean 2 or 3 really, because otherwise you have nothing. You have the ability to place 1 floater is among the weakest, I would say. Like floaters are not like of the resources. They're probably slightly better than microbes and worse than animals. But if the ability to place a floater is pretty weak. Starting cash is fine and the attack is good, but this other ability is just garbage. So you need 3 decent floater cards to begin with, and if you're playing with Venus, the floors increase, but the floors with Jovians decrease because there's just none there except Utmost Goop, which is great, but it's a end of game card. So I don't know. Stormcraft just plain and simple sucks. It might not be this week. I could see an argument of why Fabulok is weak, but I just hate it. I just hate because I love Jovians and I love floaters, and this is a waste of both. We could have gotten a better Jovian corporation, a second good Jovian corporation, a second good floater corporation, but we just got a piece of shit. So anyway, that's it for my Colonies video. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. As you can see, they're pretty balanced. They're like unplayable, needs a hand, 2 playables, and an always solid. No combo-y things, no OP things, one really weak thing. But yeah. Alright, till next time.